Welcome to Forensic Friday,
where we examine the intersection of true crime, psychology, and the heart of being human in the middle of it all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Janine, I know you and I both know about this, so we're just going to dive right in. But
Yes.
there is more info. The FBI released more information on the Gabby Petito case in Brian Laundrie.
And this is when my nerdy self just gets very excited, because in these cases, when we get a whole bunch of documents like journal entries and stuff, I can spend hours going down the rabbit hole, because this is where we learn what they were thinking.
Yep.
What were they about? What were they thinking? What were they feeling?
Yeah.
So there's a ton. This is like a treasure trove of information.
Yes, there's so much. I mean, they said that they found a ton of stuff, and I don't think they've released it all.
They've only really, I think they've released some of it, because I could find some of it online, some drawings and stuff like that.
Drawings, different things that he had. Anyway, we'll get into it, but
yes,
pretty wild. I think one of the things that I thought of when I saw that the FBI had released some of this stuff is that, in a weird way, so hear me out, a sense of gratitude that this case, the concept of this case is still alive.
Yes.
I think historically, at least from my perspective, what I've noticed is situations like this just kind of die and kind of go under the rug. Another situation, another person in a DV situation dead. And it's a big deal for a while, but then it just goes back underground.
Well, it's kind of a big deal until they find a suspect. And then when it's waiting for trial, you don't really hear much. And that's with a white female victim.
Yes.
Minority victims don't even make the headlines in the first place.
Oh, it's insane. It is insane.
That's one of the heartbreaking things is when and actually Gabby Petito's parents are working with organizations to try to bring more awareness and more voice to minority victim families.
Yeah.
And trying to get those cases more publicity to help solve some of those cases. So I think that's very cool of them. But yeah, Gabby Petito got all this attention in part because she was a white female, and we know statistically they get a lot more media time.
It's been very encouraging, the work that Gabby Petito's family has put into DV prevention. And like you said, bringing awareness, not just for white females, but for minorities and
absolutely
for females in general.
Absolutely. And I think it's interesting when you have a case like this, sometimes law enforcement comes out and they're really, really defensive, which is understandable in many ways. We're all defensive. We've talked about that.
Yeah.
In this case, there was a little bit of that at first, but I do think there's been a little bit of acknowledgement on the part of law enforcement, in part because of a lawsuit, but there's been a little more acknowledgement that our officers just need better training in examining who's the primary aggressor and how to keep these two people safe. Because that's the reason for a mandatory arrest law, is really to try to keep them from killing each other. And it doesn't really matter which one could do the killing. It's on law enforcement to figure out what's the best way to intervene and keep people safe and figure out what's going on. And I don't envy them, but also that is the job that they chose.
Exactly. I had a moment while I was doing some research on this new information on Brian Laundrie, and I had a moment where that clip where the police is talking to Gabby Petito about his ex-wife, and Janine, my rage just came back.
I know it.
It came back when he was like, my ex-wife and I, we just would get into it, and whatever the crap he said, I'm like, dude,
well, to be frank, I'm glad you brought this up, because now I'm fired up again.
I know, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's good. Here's the thing. When I think about that, the thing that makes me the most angry is there's a vibe in that clip that is that she is just hysterical and emotional.
Yes.
And
her
that's what makes me
anxiety.
so mad. And the thing that is helpful in this situation is that the information that they have found
Mhm.
actually shows the reverse.
Yes.
It shows that the person who is really struggling with their emotions and their mental health, which I can have compassion for,
Yes.
the
All
one
day.
who was really off kilter was
Laundry. Yes.
it was Laundry. It was not Gabby Petito.
Oh.
But this officer went in with the lens of his ex-wife and maybe some subconscious, subtle bias, misogyny about her being hysterical because she was sitting in the van crying, and they just missed it.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. No, Janine, it makes me crazy. It
Mhm.
does. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, his focus on her emotions, she's hysterical, when in reality, Brian had been struggling for years.
For years, even before he met Gabby.
Yes. I also have to put a quick plug in for Gabby Petito's parents,
Yes.
Joseph Petito and yes, Nicole. So Gabby and her brother have basically four parents because their parents are divorced. But what's really cool that I noticed is that they are all like they are unified together
Oh,
around this
yeah.
situation, and they look like they're all best friends, which is just great.
They are working together.
Yes. So Nicole and her stepmom, Tara, wore these shirts
Hmm.
at what is that thing that we're going to? CrimeCon?
CrimeCon.
Y'all,
CrimeCon.
we're going to
We're
CrimeCon.
going to CrimeCon in Denver in 2025. But anyway,
Yes.
we learned about CrimeCon because we were researching this.
Yes, yes. So, but at CrimeCon, they were wearing these shirts that said burn after reading.
Mm.
Did you catch that?
No, that's incredible.
So they wore these shirts that says burn after reading to throw shade at Laundry's mom.
That's awesome.
Yes, because Laundry's mom is a bona fide jackass.
Yeah, she's a lot. I mean, I
Sorry.
don't know. Yeah, I would
I'm
agree
sorry.
with that.
I
I would agree with that. Totally.
yeah, like, I don't know. So they wore these shirts to throw shade at her because it's like, who in their right mind says that and writes their son that letter after he killed his girlfriend?
Well, yeah, and what's the name of Gabby Petito's parents? I believe it's a foundation that they've created.
Yeah, so the Gabby Petito Foundation. So Gabby's mom, Nicole, Joe, her father, and then stepmom Tara, and then Jim is her stepfather. So they all created this foundation together.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We may have to do a merch push and give some donations to that foundation because
I would
one
agree.
of the things that I've been so impressed by is her family and their willingness to come together and put something in place that will actually, I believe, make a difference. Like they are fighting for a lot of great things for prevention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we talk about what they found?
Yes. Okay, fine.
Okay, I'm dying over here.
I know. Okay, so you're going to help me with this because we both did deep dives into these things.
Absolutely.
But they found so many things.
Yeah.
So they found many, many pages of his journal entries that focused on he was manic.
Yes. He had manic episodes. We know that for sure. Yes.
So a lot of his journal entries, and there were drawings involved in it, but it would be like one of the drawings / journal entries was trust no one, trust no one, trust no one, trust no one, written all over the page. All over the page.
With
kill.
A skull and kill.
Well, on the page that it has the skull, it says kill.
Yeah.
And then on one of the other pages, it looks like paint marks, but it almost could look like blood splatter. Right? It's black and white in my version, so I don't know what color it is. So maybe I'm being dramatic there, but I mean, I look at that and I'm like, but I look at that and I'm like, that could be like him just trying to create blood splatter in his journal, in his notebook.
Well, and one of the things that he wrote was that a year prior from whenever he wrote this, we don't have all the exact dates on all of it because it's not all dated either. It's just random stuff that they've released. But he talked about having, quote, a type of mania.
Yes.
And he said he would put his head through the wall. He was kicking through paintings, pouring gasoline on himself.
And trying to light himself on fire.
Trying to light himself on fire, parking in quote unquote murder land, which I thought was so interesting. He would go park in really desolate places.
Yes.
And
Wrestle
wrestling
alligators.
alligators. I know that was so wild. I'm like, you wrestled alligators.
Wrestle
and he
alligators.
said, this is a direct quote. I wanted to die, and the weird thing is nothing's changed, but the timer's running down.
Yeah.
So he was okay, compassionate brain. He was suffering. He was suffering. He did not want to live, and he was trying to find ways to die.
Yes.
And they've released a letter that Gabby had written him at this point.
I was okay, keep going. I was
okay. You jump in. You jump in if you have more details. But there is a letter from Gabby to him basically saying, I can't handle the intensity of your emotions anymore.
Yeah. And that she loves him so much, but that it's too much.
That it's too much. And so that, again, with this officer, like, give the girl some time, make her feel comfortable, partner with her emotions, and find out what the heck is actually going on. And she might have told you.
Yeah.
He's had manic episodes our whole relationship. He's held a gun to his head before. That's not something we read, but that's something that I believe could very much have happened, right? She might have said some things that could have helped us actually save him.
Yeah.
Because he was actually suicidal. And what we know in domestic violence work, if you are homicidal, you are suicidal. If you are suicidal, you're potentially homicidal.
Yeah.
We are actually taught as domestic violence clinicians to account for the other.
Yeah.
Because this is how that sometimes plays out. He didn't necessarily talk about wanting to kill other people all the time. He didn't say he loved other people. So I'm not saying he didn't think about that sometimes. But the emphasis was really on hurting himself. They found in his possession brass knuckles, bullets, and a crossbow with a scope, which I don't know much about crossbows, but that sounds real scary. A crossbow with a scope. I've never seen that before. I'm sure that's common in hunting, but
not just everyday living.
Well, yeah, and that just feels like a pretty intense, a crossbow. I'd rather get shot with a gun than a crossbow. That just sounds really scary.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting because, like you said, I actually think he was passively homicidal at times. Passively. I don't think he had, he's not one of those that would come in and be like, I want to,
They never do. How many clients have you had who come in and say, I want to kill people?
Literally none.
I've had two in 15 years, two that have come in and said, I just really want to kill people. And I'm like, well, at three. I've had three.
I've had one passive one.
Yeah. But again, they're not necessarily, this is something they're not going to come tell you right away.
Right. I mean, even him writing down kill 100 times on a piece of paper, I'm sitting there. He is passively homicidal. But here's where the mental health and here's where some of the heart piece comes in for me with Brian Laundrie. I have a little bit more heart piece for him now than I did because the mental health piece is so strong. And what sucks is it was missed.
Yes.
Right. And that's why you and I do this work is because we can look at both men and women who've been arrested for domestic violence and see that there's so much more going on behind it, right? Mental health, trauma, intergenerational patterns and abuse. So I look at Brian and I'm like, you were just significantly missed. You were not seen. Yeah. Here's the thing. Years before he committed what he committed, if he came in for a DV charge or for just concerns of mental health.
Yeah. If his parents had said, you gotta get some therapy, right?
Yes. You and I would have looked at him the same way we look at all of our other people with compassion.
With compassion and curiosity.
Yes.
And it's interesting to me. I've never thought about this until I have been, talking about Lyndon McLeod and then this case, and we have some other cases coming where there's a lot of writing. Eric Harris, lots of writing, Columbine shooter.
Yep.
When I think about it, my regular outpatient clients, my folks who come in for your more standard issue mental health stuff,
Yeah.
man, I can't get them to journal. I try. They don't love it. That's okay. I don't either. I have the same journal for 7 years because I write 3 pages a year or something like that.
Right.
Right? It's
Right.
hard. These folks who are suffering with really difficult, violent
Mhm.
imagery, I mean, all of the things, right?
Mhm.
They write and write and write and write. And I know that it's because they can't talk about the things
No.
that are haunting them and taking up their brain space.
Right. And they need it to go somewhere.
They need an outlet. But
Yes.
if you're a mom and you find a notebook, by the way, I work with a lot of teenagers. Natalie's laughing at me because she knows what I'm going to say. I work with a lot of teenagers and I adore them. They're
Mhm.
begging for boundaries. Would I read my kid's diary if they're not doing well? Yeah.
Absolutely.
You bet your ass. I'm going to pull up that diary. I'm going to read it. I'm going
Yes.
to look at their cell phone. I'm going to do all the things. And I know kids need privacy, blah, blah, love that. We are living in a really gnarly time where
Yeah.
people can get access to all kinds of things. They can buy guns and drugs and all this stuff online. If they have the world at their fingertips, I'm going to be there.
Well, and that you have to be now. You have to
have
be.
to.
When you and I were kids, we didn't have nearly the same access kids have now.
No.
But I work with some parents who do that. They look at their teens, their kids and teens phones. And it's not all the time. They're not sitting there just like
No.
stalking their
You
children.
don't have to check your diary in and out every night with their parents because then the kid's
No.
not going to write anything.
Right. But they check it. They check their phones often enough to know what's concerning and what's not concerning. And
Yes.
you just have to do that.
Best practice, in my opinion, as a parent, and I am a parent, not of a teenager yet, but I have been a therapy mom to about 1 million, right?
Yep. Yep.
One of the things that I have learned, they want you involved.
Yes.
They actually do.
And they want boundaries.
I have told teenagers' parents with a teenager in the room, take their phone and put it in a drawer at
Yes.
7 o'clock every night. And a week later, the teenager tells me, thank you.
Yes.
It's unbelievable. So you have to trust us that kids need these boundaries there. But also, you need to set this dialogue up when they're 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. You need to be talking to your kids so it's not punitive.
Yeah.
It's partnering with them.
Yeah.
And if their brain is on fire, which it is for most teenagers, pick up that journal when they're at school.
Yeah.
If they're not doing well, and you read it.
Yes.
And if they leave it out, read every word because they want you to read it.
Mm-hmm.
If they leave their phone on a counter,
Mm-hmm.
you got to ask yourself, why'd they leave that phone on the counter?
Mm-hmm.
They might actually want you to look at it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Little
Yeah.
parenting tips.
I always tell the parents that I work with who do check their kids' phones, I tell them, I say, you are parent of the year. You are doing exactly what you need to. And if
Get
your
in
kid
there.
is mad at you, that's okay.
That's okay. Make them mad. Make them mad.
That's okay. Yep.
Now, with that, I have to say, don't be punitive for no reason.
Correct.
But what you can't do is take a kid's phone for indefinitely because they pissed you off. That erodes trust.
Right.
You can't take a phone, go through it in front of them and punish them for everything in the phone. The phone is just information.
Yes. And then you have the opportunity to approach them.
Yes.
Even a little more this sounds manipulative, even more in a curiosity way of, hey, maybe you and I need to sit down and talk about drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
You are getting to this age where this is something that's coming up. Maybe because you saw something in their phone and now you get the opportunity to go and say, we're going to talk about this, right?
Yeah.
I'm not even going to say that I saw this in your phone, but I'm going to say, hey, we're going to have this conversation. We're going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about all the things, all the benefits and consequences to all these things. And we're going to have a conversation about it because you are now of the age that needs to happen.
That's exactly right.
Like you get to use these things in a way of being curious and actually creating more trust and connection if you do it well. So anyway, back to laundry.
I didn't know we were going to do parenting 101 as well.
I know, right? Back to laundry. I think if he would have had the intervention he needed to ahead of time, we wouldn't be in this position. You and I wouldn't even be talking about this. Right?
No, and I want to say from a DV clinician perspective, We always screen for mania at our facility. So it is literally built into the paperwork. And I've had people ask me why.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because to me, mania is one of the most concerning
Mm-hmm.
mental health presentations when it comes to violence. So that does not mean that people with mania are violent. I treat all kinds of folks with bipolar, hypomania, cyclothymia, any of those things. You can treat that and get a good handle on that. Sometimes people's manic episodes are honestly like stressful, but sometimes a little bit hilarious. Like sometimes they do funny, really harmless things.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's not well managed, it's just a risky thing. And so that's another prevention piece. If Brian Laundrie had walked through our doors for an evaluation, he would have had to take this assessment. He could have lied,
Yeah.
but his journal would tell me otherwise. People
Yeah.
are surprisingly honest in their intake paperwork.
Yeah.
And that's court ordered folks. Voluntary folks are even more honest in their paperwork.
Yes. So one of the things that I wanted to share before we wrap up is what Joe Petito said in one of his interviews, which was, if you want to help victims, he literally said, I sent it to Janine because I was like, oh my gosh, like most of the time, hold on, I'm going to put that on the shelf really quick. Most of the time, which I appreciate this, most of the time, the people push for basically solely soul therapy for the survivor or the victim.
Mm-hmm.
People say get victims and survivors resourced, and I 1000% agree with that. Get them resourced, get them therapy, all that stuff. Yes, 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 100 times yes. And Joe Petito literally says, focus on DV, do DV work, look at DV, help DV. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you.
that was so encouraging to hear because
Yes.
we're going to get into more of the mass shooting situation, but domestic violence underpins a lot of violence in our society. It's
Yes.
the most dangerous call officers go on. It's just rampant and dangerous. And if we treat DV and we get in there younger, faster, with more prevention, and we're more accurate in our treatment, that's truly how we can prevent some of these things.
Yep, exactly. So it was really empowering, I think, Janine, for me to hear Gabby Petito's father, the father of a victim, not a survivor, of a victim to domestic violence, to say, focus on DV, focus on domestic violence. That was so encouraging and empowering because that's what you and I, that's our passion.
Absolutely.
Like, let's start at the root of the issue. Right? I used to say when I worked with kids back in my ministry days and I would talk to them about their sadness and their depression and their family lives and all this stuff. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, there is very little I can do to actually help you besides just being a support to you. And that's what made me want to work with adults who struggle with addiction, who struggle with depression, who struggle with mental health. So I could get to the root of the family system.
Absolutely. And we talk so much about it's mental health, it's mental health, it's mental health. And it is to a degree right here, Brian Laundrie, mental health. Also, though, the domestic violence is what put it over the top.
Yes.
That is what put it over the top. That is what created a situation in which he killed Gabby Petito. That was domestic violence. He had mania. He was tortured. That's an underpinning factor. But the behavior
was DV.
Yep. And so I just agree with you 100%. I think it's encouraging that people are starting to understand it. And one of Natalie and I real goals as we're doing this podcast is awareness and prevention. And we want to go talk to your teenagers. That's really what we want to do. We want to get in the high schools. We want to talk to these kids because we have got to teach our young people how to have healthy relationships.
Yep. Janine, I want you and I to do a school, they're not pep rallies, those mandatory assembly. I want you and I to go.
Absolutely.
Assemblies at high schools.
Yes.
To educate teens on this.
I agree. We could bring a crew.
Yes.
And demonstrate behavior and bring all our people. I think we need to do that. I think that's super important.
Let's do it.
Well, thanks for joining us today for kind of an update on Gabby Petito, and hopefully you
Yeah.
learned something new, including parenting, because obviously Brian's mom was covering things up and burning things and doing whatever. And I wish maybe she'd read one of these journals and intervened sooner. I
Yeah.
can't say for certain that didn't happen, but it doesn't look like that happened.
Yeah, I mean, my brain goes to she knew. She knew.
Mm-hmm.
She knew something. If you know your kids well, you'll know something. Anyway, that's
Mhm.
another day, another conversation for another day.
That's right.
So, as always, we love you and thank you to all of our forensic friends.
Bye, guys. I'm Janine.
And I'm Nat.
And as always, thanks for listening and join us next week for more crime, psychology, and heart.